but she ignored the calls. Little bells on the top of the temple pillar, Dhwaja Sabham, were producing gentle and melodious sounds. Inside the house, musical notes from the instruments, spontaneously playing on their own, were softly reverberating. At the wondrous moment, Sri Satya Sai, the divine incarnation, was born. He had a tiny black mole on his left cheek. He also had another mole on his bosom, like the Shrivastha ornament adorning the bosom of Lord Mahavishnu. On his soles could be discerned the signs of Shankha and Chakra, which are insignia of divinity. Lakshamma, Ishwaramma's mother in law, placed the newborn baby delicately on palm leaves as tradition demanded in a corner of the delivery room. A little later, she noticed a slight movement of the baby's bed sheet. When she picked up the baby, she found to her dismay a coiled cobra below the bed. True enough, Perthi knew no dearth of snakes, but it was nevertheless quite unusual for a coiled cobra position itself as a bed for a newborn baby right in the delivery room. After the flutter caused by its presence cooled down, the snake was searched, but it was not found anywhere. There is absolutely no doubt that the snake was none other than Adi Shesha, the divine serpent who serves as bed for Lord Sri Mahavishnu in Vaikuntha. This is the first demonstration of the divinity of Sri Satya Sai. As the baby was born immediately after his mother had partaken of the Sri Satya Narayan uh, Swami Prasadam, he was given the name of Satyanarayan. Old man Kondamma Raju was immensely delighted with this name, for he was reminded of the incident in his Sri Mala Bhagavat when Lord Sri Krishna was born as the human incarnation of Lord Narayan. Lord Brahma presented himself before the child and paid homage thus: Satyavratam Satyaparam Tri Satyam Satyasya Yonim Nihitam Cha Satya Satyasha Satyam Ritha Satyam Netram Satya Athakam Tvam Sharanam Prasannaha. O Lord, you are the embodiment of truth. In fact, you are the truth. Only you are the eternal truth. Truth is the only path to reach you. Oh, the personification of the truth, I surrender to thee. Even if one goes by the name given to the little baby Satyam, it is evident that he is truly Lord Sri Narayana and the embodiment of truth. The inner, profound spiritual significance of the word Satya has come out of all its striking appropriateness in Swami's life. Ritam and Swami are the two visual ornaments of the years of Shruti Mata, Veda Mata, the mother goddess of the Vedas. When we contemplate deeply on their meaning and spiritual significance, even now a new beauties are revealed to us. Satyam and Nityam are worth meditating on. Not conception, but advent. In the Sri Mahabhagavatam, it has been stated that Lord Narayan intended to incarnate on his earth as Sri Krishna and entered the womb of Devaki Devi. After Bhagwan Satya Sai proclaimed, I am the Krishna of yore, a doubt arose in the mind of a learned scholar named Sangubhatla Ram Sharma. He was the scholar laureate of the ruler of Venkatgiri, and he was a learned scholar of scriptures and sacred epics. One day, he happened to be with Sri Satya Sai Baba in the mandir when spiritual matters were being discussed. He asked, Swami, your birth was through normal conception or by advent? Everyone present was intrigued and somewhat surprised. What is this odd question? And in any case, what is its property? They wondered. But Swami certainly knew the inner substance and profound significance of the question. He turned towards Ishwaramma, the mother, who was sitting in the front row, and said, Tell Ram Sharma what happened on that day when you were lifting water from the well. Ishwaramma then narrated her experience. When I was lifting water from the well, suddenly I saw a ball of bluish sparkling light rolling down from the sky. It entered my body and I lost consciousness. When I regained my senses with ministrations of my mother-in-law, I told her what had happened. She advised me not to breathe a word about it to anyone because people might draw all sorts of undesirable and funny inferences. Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai now turned to Ram Sharma and said, Do you now understand, Ram Sharma? My birth was not through conception but by advent. Kondamma Raju used to take this extraordinary child into his puja room and seat him there. As he would perform the worship, he would note that the child's presence gave him immense tranquility of mind and he could effortlessly concentrate on God in meditation. Why not? It is perfectly understandable. Whoever enthrones Bhagwan in his heart is bound to experience transcendental peace, which is something that every devotee knows from personal experience. The baby was extremely handsome. Neighboring womenfolk used to spend hours and hours playing with him, caressing him and embracing him. Ishwaramma never bothered to know what caste or community or faith they belonged to. She raised no objections whatsoever. The baby too learned to love them and like their company. He would often run away from his mother's lap to the company of others. He was very restless except in their company. Bhagwan Satyasai once declared that he would unfailingly go to those who yearned to him wholeheartedly. When we hear of his childhood pranks and plays, we realize that even as a child, he had been practicing what he declared much later when he grew up. The house next to one adjoining Kondamma Raju's belonged to a Karanam. The lady of the house was Subamma. Whenever she took the charming child in her arms, his face would glow in happiness. He would titter with delight and she would experience supreme joy. She had no children of her own. She often took this child to her home as proudly as if she was bringing home precious treasures. She smothered him with her motherly love. Subhamma's family was a Brahmin family and was vegetarian in food habits. As Satyam always insisted on going to her house and found much happiness there, people used to observe that, like his grandfather Konam Maharaju, little Satyam would also be a vegetarian and hence he preferred to spend much of his time in the environment of Subhamma's house. In fact, Satyam was not as happy in his own house as he was in Subhamma's. Some of the relatives of Kondamma Raju's family used to comment that Ishwaramma was Devaki, the natal mother of Lord Krishna, while Subhamma was Yashoda, his foster mother. Another unusual feature of Satyam was that he never used to ask for any particular thing to eat, nor for any particular piece of clothing. Clothes used to be brought from the neighborhood town of Hindupuram and Anantpuram for all children in the family. Little ones would gather around and eagerly snatch up pieces they preferred, but Satyam would cheerfully accept whatever was left behind. He never indicated that he had any choice of his own. There was nothing that would particularly prefer. On the other hand, when he saw the other children in happiness, Satyam's face would bloom with pleasure and satisfaction. Your happiness is my food, Swami declared many years later. That surely must have held true even when Satyam was a mere child. He was full of pity, compassion, love, and sympathy for any living being subjected to hardship and grief. A few playful boys once collected about a dozen frogs and were carrying them in a basket. They planned to have fun by subjecting the poor creatures to some sort of torture. Satyam requested that they be freed. The boys did not agree. Suddenly, Satyam transformed them into pigeons through his divine will. He told them that there were no frogs in the basket. When they disbelievingly opened the lid to see, the birds escaped into the sky. We can read a spiritual meaning too in this incident. From that day to this day, Bhagwan has been transforming ordinary individuals who are entrapped in living like frogs in the deep mire of ignorance into strong beings who are whole, bold, and happy, and capable of soaring free in the spiritual firmament like the birds in skies. Even as a little boy, Satyam was fond of natural beauty. He spent much time contemplating nature. Mountain peaks, stars, and sky gave him profound happiness and contemplation. At such times, he appeared serene and serious, way beyond his tender age. The women of Parthi, who had seen him so lost in his thoughts, used to refer him as Brahmajani. They might have no doubt said so in mirth and frolic. They could never suspect that the boys they were making fun was indeed a Brahmajani. Divine touch. Ishwaramma and Karanam Subamma would often sit in front of portico of their house, overlooking the street, and spend time in conversation. Right in front of them in the street, Satyam would wear a bandage across his eyes and play hide and seek with his colleagues. This was the time when cattle headed home from pastures. There were always the risk of unruly animals trampling passers-by. Ishwaramma would naturally feel apprehensive about her darling child's safety. But Subamma would always reassure, calm yourself and just keep nothing watching. Nothing untoward will happen. The blindfolded Satyam would catch hold of some rogue animal. Under his gentle touch, the animal would become docile, lower its head and move away harmlessly. Such incidents used to make onlookers baffled. Probably because Satyam was born under the auspicious influence of the Ardha star, his heart would melt at the very sight of suffering. Ardra in Sanskrit means compassionate. If a hungry man would stand at his door, Satyam would run inside, bring some food, and place it affectionately into the outstretched hands. Glow of happiness in the eyes of the hungry person would fill Satyam's heart with satisfaction. He used to bring to his home persons shivering from cold and gave them clothes to cover themselves. It was customary for people to carry fowl upside down by their legs, bound together and heads hanging down, a position torturous to the poor birds. Bullocks were goaded to move faster by twisting their tails cruelly. At the sight of such insensitive cruelty, Satyam would suffer the agony of the poor birds and animals on himself. After finishing school in Puttaparthi, Satyam went to the nearby town of Bukkapatnam and enrolled in the middle school. The loving mother watched with bated breath as the little child prepared day after day to go to Bukkapatnam. He was hardly out of his cradle. Now he had to walk all the way to town. Satyam would put on a white shirt and short, apply vibhuti on his head and a red dot of vermilion to lend accent to it. With a small bag containing his midday meal of cooked ragi in one hand and a bag of books in the other, he would bid her goodbye every morning. The poor lady's eyes would swim in tears. He would leave home at about 8:30 a.m. and return only at dusk. How could she endure the agony of his absence till then? Sadness haunted her every moment of the day. His fellow pupils at school were envious of Satyam. He was evidently the cynosure because of his excellent sense of cleanliness and immaculate orderliness. As soon as the boys stepped out of the village, they would catch hold of Satyam, duck him in the river Chitravati to make his spotless white clothes dirtier than theirs. The dirty deed accomplished, they would feel happy and fulfilled, but never would Satyam complain to his beloved mother against them. The teacher's chair. In the school of Bukkapatnam, a teacher by the name of Kondappa was dictating notes to his pupils, who were assiduously taking them down. Satyam alone was not doing so, which annoyed the teacher. How could he know that Satyam, the all knowing and all comprehending, had no need for taking down notes? He ordered Satyam to stand upon the bench, a punishment usually meted out to delinquent students. The boy meekly obeyed. Time passed, the bell struck to mark the end of the class, and Kondappa had to leave. Though he tried to get out of his chair, he could not as it stuck to his bottom. Teacher who was to take the next class was Mehboob Khan. He came in and understood the situation. He asked Satyam to get down and be seated. As soon as Satyam took his seat, Kondappa was automatically released from his own chair. This was but one small Leela of Satyam that was played merely to demonstrate that he was no ordinary run of the mill schoolboy. News of this episode soon spread in Bukkapatnam and caused some unrest too. The incident proved that an incarnation of God cannot be bound by man-made limitations. In due course, Kondappa recognized Satyam's divinity and wrote and published some poems in his praise. When the story of the teacher's tale reached Ishwaramma, she feared the future of her boy's education. She cautioned Satyam, if you do not study hard and succeed, you will have no future but to eke out a living by tending cattle. Well, can the word of Bhagwan's mother ever go wrong? Swami did not work hard at his studies in school, but as his divine mother had warned, he is certainly tending cattle. What are the animals now in his care? All living beings are now under his care and protection. That is why he was he has verily become Pashupati. His simple minded mother had never dreamt that her darling child, so remiss at school, would eventually take up such a glorious job that of minding the universe as Bhagwan. The end of the year saw Satyam appear for the final year examination held in the town of Penukonda. He came first, and the people of Penukonda took out a grand procession in honor of this brilliant boy. In her heart of heart, Ishwaramma was delighted at the success of her charming boy, but she was at the same time worried that it might arouse more jealousy amongst the other boys. Often did she wonder and feel astonished at some of the words uttered by Satyam, his decisions and conclusions, the sharpness of his views, and the manners in which he expounded them. Subhamma's husband, the Karanam, was sporting a moustache, all too odd and prominent somewhat in the style of Hitler. His conduct was also unusual. Satyam composed songs making fun of him and organized with colleagues to sing them in public. Ishwaramma would not approve of such mischievous activities. She entrusted the task of correcting Satyam, of all people, to Subhamma. Subhamma admonished Ishwaramma. The little Guru Master knows how to distinguish between good and bad. Leave it to him and let him be. With a mere wave of his hand, Satyam would materialize whatever his companions asked for, be it a fruit, a flower, or a sweet. When they asked to know where he was getting them from, he merely said that some celestial beings were giving them to him. Yes, there can be no doubt about what he claimed. Swami is the supreme master. It is but natural that heavenly beings should serve him with whatever he demands. Tiger Hunter chided. It was around noon one day when a driver in uniform was noticing striding into Puttaparthi. As he walked in, birds on the branches of trees raised loud cries of fear and distress. Satyam was sitting in the front portico of Karanam Subhamma's house, conversing with his friends. As the driver stepped out there, the children scattered in fright. The man told Satyam that his master's jeep got stranded on the other bank of the river Chitravati. The master was in hot temper, having heard that a boy of miracles was in this village. He had come here to obtain some vibhuti if he could get the master out of his problem. Satyam agreed to follow him to the jeep. The master was proudly stroking the dead body of a tigress, evidently shot by him in the forest. Satyam said to him, "What harm has this poor animal done to you? Why have you killed it for no reason? Her two little cubs are missing their mother and are feeling miserable. It was I who made your vehicle break down to make you realize this. Go back to those little motherless cubs, rescue them, and entrust them to the care of a proper zoo. Never should you kill a living being for your own pleasure. You might shoot, but only with a camera, not with a gun. That would bring you name and fame." Surprisingly, the engine of the house sprang to life with a mere touch of Satyam, and it went back to the way it had come. Peda Mankamma Raju, Satyam's father, was in a panic situation at home. For defying an Englishman, that too one who was sporting a gun, his little son might invite trouble from the police. On the other hand, the Englishman felt remorseful. Sometimes later, he brought the sin of the dead tigress and offered it to serve as a footrest to Swami. Even today, it is there in Prashanti Nilayam near Swami's throne, serving Swami as his footrest. Each and every incident in Swami's life serves as a mirror, reflecting the essentiality of Swami's divine personality. Swami is the personification of ahimsa, embodiment of compassion and pity for helpless creatures. He is Jesus Christ and Bhagwan Buddha personified. Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba is the teacher of teachers. Om Sri Satya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 3.